Hello, everyone. I thought I would talk to you about how to write dialogue. Now, I actually think that the dialogue in most books, in fact, in most movies, is not always terrible per se, but just boring, lackluster, serviceable. There's a reason now why a lot of movie studios are looking to use AI to write scripts, which is unfortunate. I don't advocate for that at all. I think it's a travesty. But one of the reasons is because a lot of movies are so formulaic that perhaps an AI could write a formulaic movie script. And so I think that the dialogue in most movies, even movies and in books that I really like, that are where I really like the story or the characters or the emotion, even there the dialogue tends to be at best serviceable. There are only maybe a handful of movies, especially movies that I've ever seen that have good dialogue. In fact, I'm going to give some advice that may sound counterintuitive because I actually think if you want to learn how to write good dialogue, you shouldn't turn to books for that. Not because some books don't have good dialogue, some do, but to me, I actually think that plays often have the best dialogue. Even in movies that are based on plays usually have very dialogue because the written word is paramount in theater because that's all there is. You know, in books you can rely on narration. In movies you can rely on cinematography and facial expressions. And so when you're talking about dialogue, really is the theater. That's what it's all about. And so I think that if you want to learn how to write dialogue, you should read a lot of plays. If you want to write, for example, poetic or lyrical dialogue, you should read Shakespeare. If you want some more modern examples, you could read or even watch some films by Tennessee Williams, who I thought wrote a lot of good dialogue. And if you're looking for movies that have good dialogue, you could watch almost any movie directed by Billy Wilder. Some Like It Hot, The Apartment, Double Indemnity. Because a lot of those had very snappy dialogue where the lines are very memorable. Or watch a movie like Casablanca that has a lot of quotable dialogue. And to me, the best dialogue is either kind of snappy banter or it's lyrical or poetic in some way. But I think one of the reasons why you don't hear a lot of that kind of dialogue is that writers are so terrified of being perceived as unrealistic. Even though realistic dialogue is frankly boring, people are boring in real life. In real life, people repeat the same things over and over again. People stutter. I wouldn't. I don't think you should try to write realistic dialogue because it's not memorable. And for example, you have a movie like All About Eve, which I think has some fantastic dialogue about. It has the famous line, "Fasten your seatbelt. It's going to be a bumpy night," but it also has some more poetic dialogue. I can't remember all of it now about the waves of adulation, wrapping you up like a blanket. That's not the exact line, but something like that in All About Eve. There's a lot of um, literary scripts they were called in the golden age of Hollywood were written, so quite often by the writer Joseph Makowitz, who is was the brother of Herman Makowitz, who wrote Citizen Kane. He's also, I think, the great uncle of Ben Makowitz, who hosts TCM. He wrote some really great dialogue. And so to me, the best kind of dialogue is dialogue that is poetic, or is snappy or lyrical or witty. And of course, there's some dialogue that, for example, a character can say something at the right moment that if you were to take it out of context, it wouldn't sound all that profound. But in the moment, it can. So that's another kind of dialogue. And so now, of course, not every kind of story needs good dialogue, though. Sometimes, if you have a horror film or an action film or a horror story or an action story where the characters are basically screaming and running and it's more about the tension, then you don't always need, a literate script. I'm not saying that a book or a movie necessarily has to have good dialogue in order to be good. But anytime you have a story where dialogue is paramount to plot and character, I do think that it's a good idea to have at least some scenes that are memorable, where you can remember the lines. Not necessarily every scene, because even the best Movies, plays, books will have serviceable dialogue that is meant, primarily for the plot and isn't meant to awe or inspire. But to me, every story should at least have a handful of scenes that are memorable or that stand out. So to me, that's how you should write good dialogue.